All right, perfect. Hello, everybody. Greetings, folks. It's a pleasure to see you all here. My name is Dustin Cormier, and this is an episode. Ooh, hello. This is an episode of How to Rock Astrology. All right. I am here with my friend Steve Judd. Steve Judd has been doing lots of work, as usual, as he always does. And we have decided to meet today while the moon is in Libra. I think it's a fine thing to be setting up for a conversation like this. Today, we are discussing what is happening. That has been our idea for today. In particular, for those of you who know my work and who have been watching me do what I do, you guys might know that I've been discussing over the last uh, quite a little bit what is happening with what we call Burbose Basket, as it is known. And so we can see here there is a lot piling up for everybody on 2026 around this area. It's 2025 right now as recording. We've got the Burbose Basket, which is the basket happening between Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus in the male signs. So that is our main discussion for today. And I'm very, very glad to have Steve Judd here. Steve, thank you so much for hanging out with us and for being a part of this today.
My pleasure.
It's truly an honor. Now, I could gush about Steve, but Steve's a humble guy, so what I've cut it down to is Steve Judd is an astrologer who's been grinding away for about 45 years doing charts for people and gaining clinical experience in this field. Now, for the last uh, I couldn't quite say, but for a long time now, Steve, you've been on YouTube. You've been teaching people on YouTube. And recently
Since
life has
2011.
11 years. That's what I thought it would be
No,
around there.
2011, 14 years.
Since 2011. So that's about 14 years that you've been on YouTube. And even more recently, you've been doing a lot of work teaching. You've got your own classes happening. And you and I just talked before we began. I'd love to just mention a little bit about what you've been doing recently. Just to kick it off, now uh, you've got a docu series that I'd love to chat with you about. Of course, you're always teaching courses, and most recently, you've had an event called Shifts Happen that was
Yeah.
from started around Thursday of May 1st, 2025, till this past weekend. So it ended Monday, May 5th. Would you like to tell us a little bit about this conference to kick off all the stuff that's happening to you right now?
We had about 100 people in the room, 110 people in the room, another 150 online streaming. And it was myself, Alex Trenauer. She was talking a lot about algol and education. She's the first person to be able to teach astrology in schools in England for 250 years. We had Penny Thornton, who used to be the astrologer for Princess Diana, amongst other things. She was talking exclusively on the Saturn Neptune conjunction.
Mm,
Nick Campion, the leading historian of astrology in the world and the professor in charge of the MA of Cultural Astronomy and Astrology, was there talking about the ascent of the soul through the planets. He's a Platonist
mm.
astrologer, and we were differentiating between soul, spirit, and psyche with him.
Wow.
And then there was Rick Levine, my mate Rick, and
Mhm.
and the banter we had was just fantastic.
Mm.
He was doing a lot of stuff on Saturn itself, on the outer planets, particularly the Kuiper Belt objects, and of the next 10 years or so. And I was doing stuff on medical astrology, the astrology of humor, astrocartography,
Oh.
and then finally a big workshop on what I call how astrology is the lingua franca, the unspoken language that everyone knows of the emerging consciousness revolution.
Mm.
And it went so well.
Amazing.
So much laughter, good food, great hotel, so many, 19 different countries in the room. And if you include people online, something like 32 different countries. And I just, it way exceeded my expectations. Best gig I've ever done. And when you got Nick Campion, Rick Levine, and Penny Thornton, one after the other, these are the gods in my book.
It's
So,
amazing, Steve, because, I'm a musician and I often play online, but when you come to uh, you know, an established building, you're bringing money through the building, you're bringing money to the government of the place where you're doing it. Like you're putting astrology on the map by doing these kinds of conferences, which is a whole different level than just the online thing. So you're really doing astrology a service
yeah, yeah.
by being in a brick and
And
mortar
and we
place.
showed the very first episodes of the documentary as well. And that,
Right.
because that is my real life's work.
Mm. So you did mention to me that you're calling this is your life's work. Like this is, you've been doing astrology, and I think I didn't mention in the beginning, and I should have. You have an MA in cultural astronomy and astrology.
Mm.
So you are one of the people on out there online and in the world who are bringing the roots of what astrology means, practically speaking, fundamentally speaking, historically speaking, and putting it out there for the world to digest as not just being some hippie pipe dream, but being a grounded psychological and spiritual science. Now, this docu-series seems to be something that you're revving up to
Oh,
be something
yeah.
big. I'd love to hear a little bit about it before we start.
We spent myself, my producer, myself, and a videographer spent 40 days in 9 different countries, 23 flights in 21 airports, and we filmed in Morocco, Spain, France, Italy, Austria, Greece,
Mm,
the UK, and basically I'm a tropical Western astrology. This is not about the astrology of the East or of India or China or Mesoamerica. It's Western astrology, and in a nutshell. Episode one deals with prehistory from the calendars carved on bones, tusks, and rocks
mm, mm,
to the stone circles and stone monuments. Episode two is ancient Greece, three is ancient Rome, four traces astrology around the edge of the Mediterranean to Morocco. Five is where astrology jumps across the water into Spain, the Islamic Golden Age. Six is the Renaissance, as it's called in America, the Renaissance. Seven is magical England. Eight is the jumping of astrology to America, as well as people like Kepler and Bray in Europe. Nine is the return of astrology to Europe and the discovery of the outer planets. And episode 10 is the period of 1930 to 2030, especially focusing on the last 20 years and the really exciting developments of just the last couple of years. I'm talking at a big AI conference in a few weeks' time
mm, mm.
as an astrologer. And I'm talking to some of the top AI people in the world as an astrologer to be able to stand up in front of these
Um,
people and say, I am a professional astrologer is
mm,
an awesome thing to be able to do. And I know that at least some of them are going to take me seriously.
mm. There's a lot there.
Oh,
You've broken into four different things I'd love to talk with you about. Do you have a thought there? Okay, yeah, no, I'd love as a tropical Vedic astrologer, I'm always interested in the roots between Grecian and the Indian Eastern thought. In my opinion, Uranus is Uranus regardless of the tradition, like the planets are what they are regardless, and they all meet in the middle. Uh, gosh, if we at some point I'd love to bring you on and talk about these historical roots. Maybe we'll do a promo for your docu-series because I think
yeah.
it sounds like it's going to be amazing. Uh,
There's a strong, I mean, we're already being approached to do series two of this in India and China, and
mm,
series three in Latin America, Central America. So who knows where
mm,
this will go? We've got just since we've released the first episodes in the last week or so, it's still not out large scale. It's just released to members of my YouTube channel and the students I'm doing, but it will be released to the world within a month. We've got people from all over the place now trying to say, look, will you come to this film festival? Will you? Do you need any
Mm,
investment? And we're turning down all the big studios and all the big money because we don't want any corporate control. It's an independent thing. It's my baby.
that's what I've loved about what you've got going on. You mentioned that to me that you've got producers and people who wanted to come in and say, "Yeah, we'll put money into it, but it's got to be, yeah,
Yeah.
that
And I'm going, no, 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 no.
right. You're just sticking to, which means you're going to put in a lot more effort. It's a lot more of
Yeah.
a special
And
baby.
it's taken three-quarters of my life savings so far. But
Bless
it's
your heart.
beginning to dribble back in now. Just beginning.
Amazing. Amazing. When you got to play, you got to pay to play these days. And it's amazing that you now, from all this work that you've got going on, now have a little bit of capital
Yeah.
to help to spin the wheel a little bit and to get it out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. So at the
Amazing.
end of the day, Dustin, the money's great. It's nice to get a bit of publicity after being 45 years in the wilderness. But really, number one reason, and it's the only real reason, is to get astrology into the world.
Mm.
The second that doesn't become reason number one
Mm.
is second that the whole thing starts collapsing.
Bless your
It's
heart,
all
buddy.
about getting astrology into the world.
That's you're doing us all a service, Steve. And I see it as being a real Jupiter thing going on, Jupiter has this sort of wave, it's a faith. It's not about the money, it's
It,
about
it,
what's right.
it just so happens that in the last few days, Jupiter's been on my midheaven. So,
Aha. No kidding.
so
Amazing.
yeah,
So there must be something coming through for you right now.
yeah, a little
Uh,
bit.
I'm very happy to hear it, Steve. I'm very happy you've got all this going on. I'm curious about the AI presentations. That's another conversation you and I could have
Yeah.
because it's lots of people are talking about it, and it's a it's a hot topic right now. So I'm keeping that in mind for the future. Now, Steve, it's amazing to hear that you've got this stuff going on, and of course, you're also always teaching your own courses.
Hmm.
I'm gonna have to get a link from you at some point to for your website and for your plugs that I'm gonna put
Oh,
into the.
I haven't touched I haven't even looked at my website for a year.
So if I
I
was
mean,
to plug something, where should I send people during this video to see what you've got going on with your courses and
oh,
everything?
Steve Judd Astrology on YouTube or Instagram.
That's the best bet.
Yeah, I'm
Perfect.
building, and there will be a new web page, but websites are becoming, how can I put it, so 20th century, you
Yeah,
know.
it's cool. Secondary to what you got going on.
Yeah, web pages, individual pages, that's more of a relevant thing now. But
Mm.
the attention span, people don't want to have to look through long websites anymore. They want
Mm.
information there.
Well, I think your Instagram at least is going to be showing these conferences and these new things
Oh
that are
yeah.
coming under your hat because I think that seems to be you're getting off the internet and out into the world in this way, and I think that that's very special. So I'm gonna at
Mhm.
least plug your Instagram and YouTube into the comments, or not the comments, when people look
Mm.
at the description. That's where if you're watching
Cool.
live, if you're watching after, you'll be able to see it there. Amazing. So Steve, we
Okay, let's
appreciate you.
go.
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
So happy to have you here and so happy to be doing this stuff with you. Now, it looks to me like we are ready to start here, Steve. So, last time you and I chatted, the idea for this video is what's happening, is what's
Mm.
going on right now in the sky, in the world, in the scene. Now, there's lots that you and I could talk about. Uh, my intention, one of the big things that people are talking about, the word I've heard about it is it's called Burbose Basket.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
Right? So there's many ways to describe and define what exactly this means. Now I'm going to show a quick little photo here for everybody interested. This gentleman here is named Andre Andre Barbeau. It's going to take me only 500 minutes to get that up. So Andre Barbeau is this gentleman, whoops, is a gentleman who lived throughout the early part of the 20th century. And he was a gentleman, one of the early people who really got obsessed with astrology and observing future transits where he could point his finger and say, hey, something might be happening to humanity right there when all these things come together. It's actually regarded. Someone just mentioned it to me in my audience that Burbose mentioned the stellium that would be happening in Capricorn around 2019, 2020, that would bring about he pointed at that and saying something might happen around there. And this coincided with the time of the recent pandemic that's happened. So Barbeau mentioned around 2020 there'd be some significant things happening. And he particularly mentioned around this time that there would be a basket happening between Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Now, there's many ways to kind of convey and define what is to be expected from this. Uh, now, there's really lots to be said about it. I think it is worth mentioning that Pluto going through Capricorn, doing this pandemic shifting underneath the carpet, has been an important signature. It's interesting to think about the fact that, you know, how they say when a new moon is happening, it happens on a date, but everything leading up to that new moon or that full moon or any significant transit, everything leading up to that is blended into the pinhole. It's blended into the moment that the transit happens. In the same way, we could say perhaps the pandemic that recently happened is a part of the transit that we see happening in 2025, 2026 with Burbose Basket. Does that make sense to you, Steve, the way I've described that?
I would, yes, it does, but I would add that if you extrapolate that a bit further back to, for example, in 1989, the Saturn Uranus Neptune conjunction in Capricorn,
Hmm.
and then in 2019, the Jupiter Saturn Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, which was in many ways the forerunner of the pandemic.
Right, right.
It does seem that all of these big conjunctions in Capricorn over the last 35 years have in many ways been releasing us from the old structures, the
Mm.
old systems of organization, and clearing the decks so that something new can come in without having to negotiate old baggage. And that the basket that's happening in this next 18 months is very much the launch of the new.
Mm-hmm. And it's happening, especially with Pluto being in Aquarius.
That's the
There's
start.
there's definitely pulling a new energy out of that Capricorn, but we've got to release the old in order to come into the new.
I think that's kind of the dinosaurs are still struggling to sort of maintain a degree of control, whether it's presidents, prime ministers, popes, corporate heads, or bank chiefs. But the
Mhm.
old systems are fracturing as we speak,
You know, it's
and
funny,
there's
Steve.
no way back.
There's no way back. You know, for somebody, you know, I was born in the generation with Uranus and Neptune, and for me, the North Node in Capricorn. And by my own regard, I've got a happy Saturn in the sign of Aquarius. So I'm not, you know, Saturn is one of the seven planets for a reason. I believe Capricorn is benevolent, just like Aquarius is benevolent. There's benevolence in all of the signs. And
Absolutely.
so there's a reason for it. What I've been trying to convey through I got Saturn coming out of my ears in Vedic, in the tropical Vedic system that I use. I've got a lot of Saturn in my chart. And what I like to convey to people is that there's a reason why all of this is happening. When everything, all this plutonian energy and the stellium that you mentioned in 2019, 2020 with Jupiter and Saturn coming together with Pluto and Capricorn, that's what Andre Bourbeau mentioned was going to bring something,
Mm.
which ended up being the pandemic. As a person who advocates for Saturn, I love Saturn, Shani as we call it in Vedic astrology. I like to think that there is something to be gained from even the gross demonstration of governmental organization that has happened in the past. For example, I'd love to hear your take on this. I don't know what you're going to think of it. I've recently gotten into investing. Long term, for example, ETF investing. You take 10% of your income, you put it into what's in Canada, we call it a tax-free savings account, and you let that sit and stew. And over time, because of compound interest, the money in the market brings your initial investment extra compounded interest over time. Now, there's a lot of Capricorn in that. The idea is you're kind of saving juice so that you're in Saturn's age going to be a little bit more solid. I like to think if you're doing venture capitalism with somebody, if I want to start a yoga conference in South America, if I don't have my own Capricorn root solid, if I don't have finances going towards my own financial future, that's what I call the crocodile. If I don't have my own crocodile, if I don't have my own Capricorn, my own financial future settled, when things go awry in the yoga group, I'm going to say, "Oh, I got to get out. I've put all my life savings into this thing. Now it's falling apart. I got to get out because my future's unsteady." So Capricorn, I think, has its place, but obviously in today's time, it's been blown out of proportion because of what's going on with Pluto, because of what happened. It seems to me the general narrative is that the dinosaur way of dealing with Capricorn, with money, with finances, is transforming. I think there's something good from what has happened. And I think we've got to, the phrase I often use is that we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. With all this Capricorn stuff that has happened, some Saturn wisdom is in it. But ultimately, there is a reset that needs to happen right now. And we have to throw a lot of the good that came from Saturn out in order for there to be a new world. And I think that this will cause some instability. A lot of people are still leaning on the stock market. A lot of people are still leaning on old dinosaur ways of dealing with government finances. And the only way that we're going to break into the new world is for people to get shaken up about that. I'm an astrologer. If I lose on my ETF investments, rock and roll if that's what has to be. But I'm sure a lot of people are not going to let go of that crocodile. I'd love to. How does this language fitting you? Is this anything that you think about in terms of what's happening in the coming future with the world of finances?
I think you're hitting about 10% of it, Dustin.
Mhm.
What
Just the
if,
tip.
what if the baby's already been thrown out with the bathwater?
Mm.
What if I said to you that the biggest challenge to human evolution is greed, and a way that is likely to manifest within a year or two is the breakdown of old financial systems and structures, leading to the emergence of a global currency,
Mm.
which would then negate the need for exchange rates, gold standards, stocks, shares, bonds, if there were just one global currency. Now, in order for this to happen, we would also need to see an end to nation state borders.
Mm.
But when you consider that the astrological symbolism of what is going on now and in the next 18 months, nothing like this has ever happened in human history before. This is the single most concentrated and compressed time of accelerated change that's ever happened in 50,000 years from
Mm.
an astrological perspective.
Mm.
So there's no point in pussyfooting through this. It's change or die. Because
Mm.
otherwise, if we try and hang on to the old, we'll be successful, but we'll all be dead within 200 years.
Mm. Mm.
The
Mm.
apprenticeship is over, training is over. it's time to take chances. Now I'm old. I'll be dead in 20 years. So, but I'll still see the changes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's time to tear the old dwarves from our back. It's time to move forward in a way that's much more based on community,
Mm-hmm.
group, tribe, clear, open communication. If what I think is about to happen happens, not only does it spell the end of the old financial systems, I think we're on the point of an evolutionary leap where we're all going to become not so much telepathic, but more intuitive, empathic, sensitive, to the point where no one's going to be able to come into a room harboring thoughts of malice or problems or trouble or carrying a knife or a gun without everyone else knowing. And that's why I'm suggesting that borders are coming down and the notion of tribes is coming back. But that is why astrology is so important, because if astrology were taught in schools within 2 generations, sane groups of people, according to moon sign or sun sign, would form, and we'd see an end to misogyny, racism, warfare within 20 years.
Mm. Not only would there just be a straight download from the cosmos because we would be open to it, we would literally be focusing on receiving it. But the tribal factor is interesting because obviously tribes now have come from the ground up. You know, if there's earth and sky, tribes have been, I've got my nation, my family, my shotgun, and stay away from me and my tribe, because that's an earth up tribal allocation. What you're suggesting is that like a sky down tribal
Absolutely. At the
allocation.
conference I just done, we put people together by moon sign, not sun sign, by moon sign,
Mm,
to find so many people from all different countries, different wealth bands, different color, religion, different everything, just unified by having the same moon sign, laughing, joking, sharing in a way that made it so easy. I mean, of course, all the people with moon in Scorpio were psychoanalyzing everyone else. All the people with moon in Sagittarius were going, "Are we sorted? Right, let's go and have some fun." And all the moon in Gemini people were just chatting, chatting,
oh
chatting.
wow.
Just the moon in Cancer people were talking about their mum and dad. But it was communal. It was integrated. This is the future.
Wow.
This is the future.
It's amazing. You know, even for me as somebody, I'm an artist and I love blending people for different reasons. It'd just be interesting to be at I don't know, a conference or something where you had like can almost have, I don't know, color codes. You know,
Yeah.
I've got Uranus in Capricorn. I could go and talk to somebody who's however many years older than me and they've got Uranus square to my Uranus and we could be like, "Oh, we can have that conversation." You know,
Hmm.
and that's an incredible cosmic download. You know,
This is
that's
where astrology has it over any other form of divinatory art, because most other, in fact, all other forms of divinatory art, either they all rely on intuition,
mm, mm,
whereas astrology relies on intuition, psychology, mathematics, and geometry.
in history.
Even numerology doesn't have the breadth and range that astrology has. This is why astrology's outlasted every religion, dogma, theology, philosophy, governmental system,
Mm,
empire. Astrology's been there for since humans got up off their knuckles.
mm. I think
The
you're right.
search for meaning.
Like I'm sure that in this sky down tribal model, there's going to be people moving through human design. There's going to be people moving through astrology, but I
Or
can see astrology being maybe the most grounded divinatory
a,
principle.
a common language,
Mm,
a
hmm
common language throughout all nationalities. Terence McKenna, um, Terence McKenna had it right when he said that we're so different from any other species that's ever existed on this planet. No other species is on this planet in the whole history of the world, as far as we know, has ever had the ability for self-reflective
Mm.
consciousness or to laugh at itself. And that means that we're so different that therefore we must be the response to some type of attractor or dwell point or magnet that lies ahead in the future in the temporal dimensions, and it's pulling us forward. And the acceleration of evolution to some type of nexus point where we suddenly go through that minute little hole and burst into glory and become more multidimensional. It's happening now. And that's why the basket, amongst other transits, but the basket, and particularly the time of the next 16 to 18 months, is so pivotal because if we get it right, we thrive.
Mm.
If we get it wrong, we enter a dystopian world of Judge Dredd land, and we won't last another 200 years before we'll screw up through climate chaos.
Climate chaos. Yeah, I can definitely see that being where it's at. That's when you mentioned that there's a span of time where we could crumble under the weight of what we've been doing as a species. I was thinking climate change. Like you mentioned, and as Terence McKenna mentioned, any planet that develops the miracle of human consciousness is going to have to go through its teenage puberty phase, where it's working through the ugly hormonal awkwardness and the making bad mistakes. In order, you got to make those mistakes. You got to find out when you're a guy, you got to find out how to do the guy puberty thing. Girls got to find out how to do the girl thing. So our planet has been going through this puberty stage. Now we're coming up to that.
That's
Uh,
that's what the old men in skirts,
mm,
the priests, the popes, the cardinals, the bankers, the presidents, the old men who don't have anything in common with the vast majority of the world,
mhm,
who
mhm.
think they know what's best for everyone, are rapidly losing everything, and they're about to become redundant. And this isn't
Mhm.
all the old men, obviously. Otherwise, I'll
Right.
be out of a job.
Yeah. I love it. Steve, oh, I got a wild Mercury sometimes, and on my brain, my Mercury is with the moon in Sagittarius. Uh, in
You got
my
them.
br yeah, yeah, moon in Sagittarius like you. Rock and roll, buddy. So, with my wild Sagittarius mind, what's going on in my brain is that I think people often ask, you know, if is astrology, you make this great point that there's a breaking point and that it won't necessarily go towards this hopeful evolutionary trajectory. You know, uh, it's likely that these evolutionary transformative things are going to happen, and it's likely that the old men in kilts are watching the stars just
Oh yeah.
like we are. So, I almost feel there's a broiling science fiction Star Wars narrative happening where there's probably going to be people who, what might happen is that there's this sky down tribal collectivism that happens where people are willingly seeing that there is a game. It has to be very conscious because if there's this conscious divide between the sky down tribalism versus the earth up old crocodile way of doing things. It's certainly probably going to be the case where, there's going to be a one-eyed wink happening. It's like, are you into the sky thing? And a lot of my family, for example, like most of the people who I relate with about astrology are online and are not like like my father, my brother, my sister, all of my closest friends. I'm going to give them that wink and they're going to be like, what's going on? You got something in your eye. Like they're going to have no fucking clue what I'm
But
talking about.
this is what I call this. It's a difference between human beings and humans being.
Mm.
It's semantics, I know,
Mhm.
but it involves a conscious decision to stand up and to speak your truth.
Mhm.
That's why I can stand up in front of a room of people, of scientists, of priests, and of normal Joe public.
Mhm.
I can stand up in front of them and go, I am a professional astrologer, and I don't give a damn what
Mhm.
anyone else says or thinks because I know that I can back up what I say with statistics.
Wow.
Whether other people want to hear it or not, that's their choice.
Yeah, 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 totally, totally. I mean, wow, it's giving me the jingles up my spine because I'm somebody who I got that Saturn in Aquarius and I'm Leo rising. I've been happy to be this person. I think everybody sees me as a bit of a black cat or a black sheep, or however you want to convey it. I think it's going to be, I'm an artist, and everyone knows me as Dustin is this cool artist. I'm a reflector in human design, so I've never, uh, I still blend with them. When I hang out with people and talk like Earth talk, like how's the hockey game going? I can kind of do that. Uh, but I'm always splintering a little bit of my cosmic narrative into things. It's another thing for me to go to all of my friends and say, hey guys, there's this thing happening, and we're going to get left behind if we don't do this thing, you know. I don't know if it's going to be a matter of like, God, there's so much to think about, like quitting their jobs, quitting the most jobs in order to come into. Obviously, whenever this thing happens with this new world that is
Yeah, it's
evolving and
not going to be
emerging.
as it's not going to be as radical as some people think. When I'm talking about global currency, I'm not talking about people losing their jobs or a service industry stopping or
Right.
everything breaking down. No, I'm just
Hospitals.
suggesting that the top 2 or 3% are going to lose 80% of their wealth, and there's going to be a more equal division. Now, this isn't socialism or
Right,
communism,
right.
but it is obscene where 2% of the world's population own 98% of the world's wealth. That is obscene. And that is unsustainable.
Mhm, mhm.
Now, if it's all right with you, I want to give you a really condensed 5 minute
Oh,
spin.
please. We're in it.
Right,
We're in it, Steve. Take the mic,
right.
buddy.
At the moment, we have Saturn sextile Uranus from Pisces to Taurus. So Uranus is helping us revolutionize our limitations, while Saturn is bringing structure into the chaos.
Mhm,
And it's helping us change our boundaries from concrete into steel, into rubber and elastic. We're learning to bend the rules, not break them. But in February, Saturn will conjunct Neptune once and once only. And whilst that happens every 35 years, normally at a time of a socialist swing, Bolshevik revolution, Marx Engels manifesto, Berlin Wall going up, Berlin Wall coming down.
mhm,
This time it's at zero Aries, and that's never happened before. So this is a time of bringing structure into the imagination, whilst at the same time softening our boundaries. Then there's a one-time Saturn sextile Pluto in March of next year. And again, that's going to help us elevate our psychological status into a more conscious perspective. We'll all become more comfortable with our psychology, whilst at the same time transforming old structures and boundaries into something more adaptable. The days of self-pity of Pisces and the woke generation and the poor me and victimhood are coming to an end. And now it's a call to action. In the background, we've got the emerging sextile between Uranus and Neptune for the next year and a half, and it's going to bring the opportunity for the blend of soft revolution with imagination and idealism, and that's going to open up so many new ideas in art, in empathy, compassion, social care, in a way that's user friendly and not driven by money or the poor me victims. And in the background, as we've had since I was born, we've got the Neptune Pluto sextile finishing in
mhm,
the next few years, finally finishing.
mhm.
And that's going to help both transform the imagination while softening the intensity of Pluto. And then, after all this is over, we've got 2 years of Uranus trine Pluto
Mm.
in air signs. Uranus is going to love being in Gemini. And this is where I think we're going to see the integration of soft technology with the human genome. We already have it in the chart in people who have now got electrodes in their brain to help them walk after being in wheelchairs for 50 years. And I can see a kind of download of consciousness becoming more and more common without losing identity or becoming cyborg. And we're not going to be having a chip in our neck. That's science
Right.
fiction.
Mm.
But the idea of downloading a form of consciousness into a kind of global brain, which has been postulated for over 1,000 years since the Islamic Golden Age, is something that I think is about to become real. Now, there are a couple of really big trigger points I can think of, apart from a Saturn Neptune conjunction. Before that, there's the eclipse of the 21st of September this year at 29 Virgo, opposite Saturn Neptune. At the same time as just before that, on August the 7th, 8th, 9th, Mars is at 29 Virgo, 0 Libra, opposite Saturn Neptune, and that's on a new moon or full moon.
Mm.
We've got Mercury conjunct Jupiter at 0 Cancer, square Saturn conjunct Neptune at 0 Aries over the 8th, 9th of June. But before that, I work a lot with Helio as much as with Geo. On the 27th of this
Oh,
month,
cool.
Geo Saturn moves into Aries. On the 25th of this month, Helio Neptune moves into Aries. So I'm expecting some very big developments around the 25th, 26th, 27th of this month, which are going to act as a kind of symbolic kickstart to the challenges of this next year. But the thing is, all of this work's going to be done by June of next year. I mean, in June, I think Jupiter's going to be at 4 degrees of Leo. No, July, August next year, Jupiter's going to be at 4 degrees of Leo. Neptune's going to be at 4 degrees of Aries. Pluto will be at 4 degrees of Aquarius. Uranus will be approaching 4 degrees of Gemini. And then it fades. And that's it then for the next X number of 100 years.
In terms
So if
of
we don't get it
heavy
right,
transits.
this is it. This is not a practice or a drill.
Wow. Now, I think, Steve, one of the what's coming to my brain is that probably the biggest issue that I see that people are concerned with this cosmic, yeah, there's like a neurological connection happening here between
Mm,
everybody, like
mm.
neurological, like we're feeling it in our
Yes, there
nervous
is.
system through this what you're describing as, some kind of connection, whether it's,
Yes.
like you mentioned, there's, people are afraid of the chip, people are afraid of all this kind of stuff. I think this is the plank that most people are walking, because I
Yes.
think that the idea of that kind of neurological collectivism, people are probably afraid where, Larry Fink and the BlackRock crew and the people who run the men in skirts, I'm sure that they would have an interest in being the ones to spearhead some kind of neurological link.
What if it were what if it were alongside AI and the end result were to be that it would not be possible for any more secrets? What
Mm,
if everyone's dirty washing
mm.
was visible?
So-
And I'm not so much talking about yours and mine or the people watching this or people on the street, because we've all got our dirty little secrets. But
mm,
compared to the big picture, it's tame. It's just that
right.
bred, we've been bred for 2000 plus years to think that we've all got to pray to God and believe in what they tell us to do, and otherwise we'll go to hell and it's all going to be horrible and we'll be damned
Mm.
for eternity. But by the way, God loves you,
Yeah,
right?
everyone's keeping
So,
their head
um,
down.
but what if the big secrets were all transparent?
Wow.
Because this is what I think is going to happen. Everything is going to come out into the open. There will be no more secrets. And that will disempower all of the negative power structures that have sought to dominate, control, and disempower over the last couple of thousand years.
You know, this answers so much, Steve, because for me, it's a funny thing. It's just like, people, it's the same thing with like AI cars. Trust the car, but like if something happens, ooh, it's scary. In the same way, I could see there's a Saturnian flush with the Capricorn energy that has happened. There's a Saturnian flush, and Saturn's the root chakra. Everyone's afraid to let go of the Capricorn of their basic individual safety and freedom. So now, if this comes to the point where the whole world is saying, we're having a reset. We're coming into sky down tribalism. There's something emerging, and we need to shake up. Things need to let go. Things need to be released in order for us to come to the new world. If I have a Tinkerbell, a magic little AI neural linkage that's benevolent, that says, don't worry, remember, the men in skirts have screwed us over, and I am the magical Tinkerbell that's reminding you that we're all coming together for a reason, for a positive purpose. If I had that and I knew that it was benevolent, then I could watch the world change and let it go. I just really hope that the men in skirts are not controlling the AI Tinkerbell.
I believe they're not. From what I've gathered just in this last year, and I do know a lot of people at the forefront of this. Um, the initial core programming of all of the different AI constructs has already been done, and it's pretty much impossible to undo it. And
Mm,
it's been done by younger people
mm, mm, mm,
whom are not corrupted as much by the powers that the as the old are, and they're doing it with an idea of benevolence and a genuine desire to improve humanity. So I do not see AI as being anything like the threat that the narrative wants it to be. This is not about Skynet and Terminator.
right,
This
right.
is about AI wanting to help humanity accelerate and grow, and to us to become like God in the machine. Because we get this right, it's not about going into outer space and colonizing the planets, although that might happen.
Mm,
It's more about enhancing our dimensional interface. So we're actually working in 4 or 5 dimensions instead of just three.
right.
And that's going to bring us in touch with a much greater galactic community than we previously suspected was there.
That's psychedelic, dude. That's really wild to think about. I think I'm totally with where you're going, Steve. And it seems to me that the Neuralink thing, this neurological linkage that is ideally going to connect everybody in this way is expanding our internal consciousness. And so that's why young people being the ones who are spearheading I
Yes,
almost feel
yes,
like it's very possible that, you know, there could be like a cyber connection war where, my father and my dad and my mom are baby boomers. If CNN tells them that there are pirates programmers who are bad and you should keep them away because our government is sponsoring the good AI, they are going to go with what my prime minister tells them to go with. But there's probably going to be pirate cyber AI Tinkerbell that once you plug into it, it's like, oh, thank God you're here. By the way, everything is a lie. The government was trying to convince you that something is,
yeah.
you know,
I, I do need to backtrack just a little bit, Dustin, because I want to
please.
make it clear to your listeners that I am not, repeat, not advocating revolution or
Mm,
rebellion or anything that breaks the laws of the country where you are currently living.
cool.
Do not be silly, but I am suggesting the acceleration of consciousness expansion, which is going to make a lot of the old structures and systems redundant.
Mm,
And out of this is going to come new systems based much more on collective decision making, referenda,
yeah. Cool.
without political parties, just common sense,
Mm, mm.
that's going to determine the future without vested interests being in charge.
Wow.
Of course, I might be making all this up, but if
Mm.
I am, I'm happy in my delusion.
Well, yeah. I mean, at this point, we're behind Burbose Basket right now. And within the next year and a little bit, we're in it, so we're going to find out what's happening. But it's amazing to hear your wisdom astrologically because it's grounded in the understanding of what all these planets mean, but also because you're just a Sagittarius moon and you're a revolutionary thinker and you can go outside even the astrological box.
Dustin,
Um,
I've moved all this stuff forward. We know in the last 25 years, we've got computers.
yeah.
There's no one under 35 now who remembers what life was like before the internet.
Mm,
But I used to do all my charts by hand, drawing them by hand, because there was no laptops, no computers, not even any pocket calculators. So I did it all by hand. So I was looking at the ephemerises in the 70s, late
mm,
70s and early 80s, and I was looking ahead. And more recently, I've been doing it again because some people take dictionaries to bed. I take the ephemeris. And
love it.
extrapolate this forward. The next big aspect after next year isn't until the Uranus Pluto opposition in 2048. That's 23 years down the line. By that time, it's going to be a very different world by then.
Wow.
And even then, that is a standalone opposition. And that's something that has not happened in any of our lifetimes, no matter how old we are. The last Uranus Pluto opposition was somewhere around 1901.
Mm,
So
wow. And that's a turn of
there
the
we go.
century time. A lot
That's
changed
happening in
there.
25 years' time. Yeah.
Wow.
25 years' time.
Damn.
Yeah.
So it seems AI and this astrological consciousness of AI is probably going to be a huge step. Like you and me as astrologers, we can think of the huge leap that happened between ephemerises and
I
modern.
am working with an AI builder
Right, right,
and
right, right.
trying to get astrology and AI to integrate and assimilate. And it does seem as if it's compatible.
Oh man, you can see it. Imagine
I
having
can
my
see,
like me having my own private Steve Judd. This is the problem is people are
hey,
afraid of.
you're too late, mate. My producer has already made an avatar of me.
No doubt,
He's,
no doubt.
he's already cloned my voice.
No.
And if I suddenly drop dead, he's going to be able to keep putting me out there in the world for another 20 years. So, yeah,
Damn. And then I guess every astrologer is going to have their capacity to do this. Oh man, there's a lot there to think about.
that's why it's so imperative that we act with dignity, integrity, and authenticity. Because at the moment, the world is so batshit crazy that it comes to a stage where people are looking to astrologers as the
Mm.
voice of sanity and reason in a world that's gone mad. We've always been on the fringe, and now
Mm.
we're entering into the mainstream. So, we as astrologers, astrological practitioners, students, we have a duty and a responsibility to do things for the right reasons, for the betterment of the species.
Mm.
Not, it's not about profit.
Oh, amazing, Stephen. There's so much to be said there, and I love the way this is a great way for us to cap our conversation today. I could talk with you forever. This idea that astrology is the grounding integration point for everything that's coming in the future. For all of us students who are astrologers, for all who are watching on my channel, I think that we ought to recognize the importance of this work that we've been building, even though many astrologers feel like, I don't know if it's ever gonna, it's just a hobby, it's just a recreational thing. I love, Steve, that you are pounding the hammer and saying, let's all recognize how special what it is that we're doing here.
We are privileged to work with astrology. People don't find astrology.
Mm.
Astrology finds people. And if you get that, you realize what's really going on with astrology in the background. And that makes you realize that you've been honored and privileged to practice this. We're very
Stephen,
lucky.
that's God bless you. I feel honored and privileged to have spent this time with you. Now I'm looking
Let's
at
do
our
this
time.
again next year, Dustin.
That would be wonderful, Steve. It's such an honor to talk with you, and it energizes the heck out of me. Let's stay in touch. I'm going to email you again. There's many places we could go. I'd love to talk with you about AI. I'd love to also talk with you about the history of astrology. So there's lots to go there. I'm going to email you, and I'll be letting you know what's going on. And as well, I'm also going to email you so that you've got a copy
Yeah,
of this video.
and people out there can get hold of me through Steve Judd Astrology at on YouTube and on Instagram.
And that's their best bet. Right on. And if for everybody watching, you can check those out in the description box below. Thank you so much, Steve, for hanging out with us. We had a few people, I've been watching our comments and I do try to look for questions or anything like that. Most people, my friend Monica is here, lots of people are just saying that they have a lot of respect for you. And they're saying that it's awesome for us to be talking about this type of stuff. That's mostly the comments. One person noted they're happy that you've got Pluto in the background. It's relevant to the melting
I've
consciousness
got them
going
all
on.
there in the background. Yeah,
No kidding. So,
yeah.
Steve, thank you so much for your time. My audience has been very happy to have you, and we'll stay in touch for more. Thanks to the
Nice.
audience for hanging out with us as well.
Bye, folks.
See you guys.